Before
This is a
sunrise,
foreclosure
the whole
notice.
town
No, you
gathered
can't.
outside Clara
We have
Bennett's
our orders,
farmhouse.
ma'am.
Please,
Not
this is
because
our
they
home.
cared, because
The bank
people
owns
always
it
arrive
now.
early when they think they will witness someone else's ending. Cold wind rolled dust across the yard, while two bank agents nailed a foreclosure notice onto the front porch post. Every strike of the hammer echoed like a funeral bell. Clara stood in the doorway wearing a faded black dress, hands trembling, but chin raised high. She had buried her husband, Thomas, only 6 months earlier. Since then, drought had burned the crops, sickness had taken half the cattle, and unpaid debt had circled the farm like wolves in winter. The farmhouse behind her was old, weathered, and leaning with age, but every board carried memory. Thomas built the front steps himself one summer, after promising Clara she would never trip again carrying water. Her son carved his initials into the barn wall before leaving east to find work. Her daughter once sang beside the well while drawing water on warm mornings. Now silence lived there instead. One agent read the notice loudly, so neighbors could hear each cruel word. Remove all profanity by
Silas
sunset.
Crow has arrived. This yard is
Clara
mine
swallowed
now.
hard,
You have no
but
right.
refused to
I
cry
have every right.
in front
Stand
of them.
aside.
She
This is
had
my
cried
land
enough
now.
in empty rooms where no one saw. She remembered the last promise Thomas made from his sickbed. Keep the house standing, he whispered. Keep the house standing, no matter what comes. By mid-morning, wagons rolled into the yard to carry off furniture, tools, and livestock. The man leading them was Silas Crow, the town debt collector, famous for smiling when others suffered. He wore polished boots and gloves too clean for honest work. He walked around the property like a buyer, inspecting cattle. You had chances, he said. Mercy was available before paperwork. Clara asked for one more week. He laughed softly. Hope isn't legal tender. His men began hauling chairs from the house, measuring the piano, and tagging the milk cows for auction. One kicked over a flower pot beside the steps. Another mocked the faded curtains in the window. Another laughed while carrying Thomas's favorite rocking chair. Neighbors watched from the road, whispering but doing nothing. Some pitied Clara. Some feared Silas. Most simply chose silence. Clara went inside and touched the kitchen table where Thomas once prayed before meals. She opened drawers, searching for anything left to sell. In the back of one drawer, she found an old unopened letter, tied with string, hidden beneath table linens. The handwriting on the front made her breath catch. It was Thomas's hand, addressed to a man named Samuel Reed. She had never heard the name before. Before she could open it, hoofbeats sounded at the gate. Slow, steady, heavy enough to silence the yard. A lone cowboy rode in on a chestnut horse, coat covered in road dust, hat low over his eyes. He dismounted without hurry and looked first at Clara, then at the foreclosure notice, then at the men carrying her life into wagons. Private business, Silas snapped. The cowboy ignored him completely. Mom, he said to Clara, voice calm and deep. Did your husband's name happen to be Thomas Bennett? Clara nodded cautiously. The cowboy's eyes fell on the unopened letter in her hand. Then, I believe, that belongs to me. Every head in the yard turned. Clara untied the string with shaking fingers and opened the letter. Inside was a note written 15 years earlier. If this letter ever reaches Samuel Reed, tell him, I never forgot the promise. What I owe him is buried beneath the old oak tree by the north fence. Silence spread across the farm. Even Silas stopped smiling. The cowboy slowly removed his hat. A pale scar crossed his forehead. Strong jaw, eyes tired from long roads. My name, he said quietly, is Samuel Reed. Clara stared in disbelief. Thomas had hidden this secret for 15 years, and somehow it had ridden back to her gate, on horseback. Clara looked from the letter to the stranger's face. Samuel explained that years ago, he had been a starving runaway boy, caught, stealing bread behind a storehouse. Men wanted him jailed and beaten. Thomas Bennett stopped them, fed him, hired him for a season, and helped him disappear before worse men could find him. Your husband gave me work when no one else would even give me water, Samuel said. He taught me how to mend fences, keep accounts, and stand like a man. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Thomas had spoken once of a troubled boy who worked harder than grown men, but she never knew what became of him. Samuel had searched for Thomas for years, following rumors across counties and towns that no longer existed. I found this place today, he said softly, and I found him too late. Clara touched the letter to her chest. No, she whispered. You found what he left behind. Samuel looked toward the north fence, where the old oak tree stood alone against the wind, with the whole yard watching. Samuel borrowed a shovel and walked to the tree. He dug in silence, while Silas paced angrily, insisting none of it mattered. After several minutes, metal struck wood beneath the soil. Samuel pulled free a small iron box wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were gold coins, land deeds, savings notes, and a second letter. Clara opened it with trembling hands. Thomas wrote that he never trusted banks after losing money once before, so he buried emergency savings where only memory could guard it. Half the box belonged to Clara. Half belonged to Samuel Reed if he ever returned. Silas lunged forward, shouting that the debt still stood. Samuel calmly lifted one of the deeds. It showed half the north pasture had been legally transferred years ago into Samuel's name as collateral for an unpaid promise between friends. Silas's foreclosure claim collapsed in front of witnesses. Neighbors who had watched quietly all morning now began muttering against him. Silas, red with fury, ordered his men to continue loading wagons anyway. That was his mistake. Samuel stepped into the center of the yard with the stillness of a man who did not need to shout.
Put it back.
No one moved. Then old Mr. Harper from the road stepped forward, carrying a rake. Mrs. Dalton followed with a broom. Two farmhands climbed off Silas's wagon and crossed to Samuel's side. Then more neighbors entered the gate one by one. Fear changed direction in a single minute. Silas spat in the dirt and rode away with the few men still loyal enough to follow him. By sunset, Clara's chairs were back inside. The cows returned to the barn, and the piano stood again by the wall. Samuel repaired the broken porch rail before trying to leave quietly. Clara stopped him with one sentence. "Thomas kept a room ready for you every year." Samuel looked stunned. She opened the farmhouse door. "You took too long getting here." Months later, travelers passing the Bennett farm saw fresh paint on the house, cattle in the fields, smoke from the chimney, and laughter drifting from the porch at dusk. And whenever people asked Clara how she saved everything, she smiled and said, "My husband paid his debts through friendship.